Welcome back to the channel. So in the last video, I mentioned that I was working on making a new batch of Bokashi bran or Bokashi flakes that I could use to inoculate my Bokashi bins. And so I thought I would go ahead and share with you what the Bokashi process looks like. It's the way that we in our family like to take care of our food waste instead of putting it in the trash, which is, I think, is very wasteful, and I like to minimize waste as much as possible. So I'll go ahead and introduce you first to the Bokashi bran. So just take a look right over here in this bucket. Right, this is my little scoop. Got a 5-gallon bucket here. And this is the Bokashi bran. And I last made a batch of this over a year ago, I believe. And this is basically wheat bran that I inoculated with lactobacillus or lactic acid bacteria. And I then use that to ferment our food scraps in these kind of buckets, in these 5-gallon buckets. You'll notice that it's actually 2 5-gallon buckets. So it's one set inside of another. And the one on top has holes drilled in the bottom, some small holes drilled in the bottom. And that allows any of the liquid that is generated from this process to drain into the bottom bucket. So let me go ahead and show you the process of what we do. So I have here 2 containers that we use to store our food waste inside. And today we generate quite a bit of food waste. So this is some leftover pasta that was no longer good. You'll also see in there some pieces of bacon that I unfortunately burnt this morning when trying to manage bacon and dealing with the kids, and some sandwich leftovers. So all of that is in here. And like I said, we don't want to toss that into the trash can. So I'll open up this bucket. This is the top bucket in the Bokashi setup. You can see the inside of that bucket. You can see all that white fuzz on the side. And basically what I do is I take the food from our indoor bucket and I simply empty it right in. Empty all of that in there. And if need be, I would mash it down to make it more compact, but it seems to me to be pretty compact as is. I'll give you a heads up, overhead view of this. And so the food is in there. Let me get my masher so that I can show you what that would look like. And this is an old potato masher that my wife let me abscond with and use for this. And so what I would do is just come over, press that food waste down to try to eliminate any air pockets. And then come over to this bucket, which has the Bokashi bran. Let me come down in here. Get a little bit of that bran in there. Remember, this has been inoculated with the lactobacillus bacteria. And then You just gently sprinkle some over the top. And I actually got a little bit too much, so I don't have to use all of that. But it just needs a light sprinkle. And that's it. So I would continue to fill this each day as we continue to generate waste. And I just put the lid back on. And basically, what's going to happen is that lactobacillus is going to start to consume any sugars within there. And as the lactobacillus breeds and multiplies, it also will ferment the food waste in there, which is super helpful. It means that we can use it then. Some people will use it in gardens, but I specifically like to use it in my vermicomposting setup. So to feed it to worms or to feed it to my black soldier fly larva. So you'll notice I had 2 different buckets for indoors. And we have one bucket, the previous bucket that contained things like pasta and things of that nature, which tend to do really well with the black soldier fly larva. And then I've got this bucket right here, which has eggshells and onion peels and rotten or bad tomatoes and the peel of a spaghetti squash. So none of those things, maybe outside of the tomato, would be too appealing to black soldier fly larvae, but they would be excellent for vermicomposting. And so that's what we kind of do to split up the food waste inside. And I actually have a separate bucket working that I'm filling with the stuff that would go to the vermicomposting setup. So we'll go ahead and open this one. This one I did set up with a leak-tight seal. It's kind of worn out pretty quickly, but it's very convenient to open. And you can see that it is almost full. So we had some rotten fruit in there, and I even had some of in fact, the coffee chaff that I saturated in the last video, I went ahead and tossed that in here because that will also be a nice substrate, nice food material to put into the vermicomposting setup. So I just went ahead and tossed that in there. So now I'm gonna go ahead and empty this bucket. Right in there. And as you can see, initially it's overflowing, but as I press it down, it's gonna crush those eggshells, remove a lot of those air pockets, and make it as condensed as possible. All right, so that is done. Unfortunately, I went ahead and emptied my little bin, my little bucket scooper of my Bokashi brand. Alright, I've gotten a new scoop of that, and I will just go ahead and, again, just sprinkle that right over the top. Doesn't need a large amount, it just needs a little dusting, a little thorough dusting. And once this is full, I will seal it off, and I'll actually mark it with a sticker that tells me the date that I sealed it, and I leave it like this for 2 weeks. And in 2 weeks, the fermenting process will be complete, and then I can use that, again, like I mentioned, feeding it into my vermicomposting system. Now, I recently got a chip drop, which was a delivery of free wood chips. It's a program that partners with local arborists so that they can drop their wood chips and logs at residences that are in search of wood chips. And so I've actually started putting the wood chips underneath, in the bucket underneath. And what that helps with is it allows a place for the drippings to really catch. And I'm really excited because I'm hoping to use those wood chips that have soaked in those drippings in the vermicomposting setup as well. So it's not just going to be a bunch of liquid down there, but it'll actually be wood chips that have soaked in all of that excess liquid from the Bokashi setup. You can call it effluent or whatever you might want to refer to it as, but all of those drippings would then collect and would be really useful to put into a vermicomposting setup. I think it would help to speed up the breakdown of the wood chips. But in essence, that's all it takes to do Bokashi. It's a pretty simple setup. I was able to do this, create these buckets myself. Well, not create them, but basically fashion them for Bokashi. Like I mentioned, I drilled some holes in the top bucket, in the bottom of the top bucket, and then I set that inside of an intact bottom bucket that catches any of the drippings. It's a 2-week setup. It's anaerobic, so that's why I have the lid on top and the lid on top of this one as well. And so that's why we press out as much of the air as possible. It allows an environment where the lactobacillus can really thrive, can multiply, and can effectively ferment the food. And that occurs smoothly year-round. It is a little bit faster, obviously, in the summertime, but I still go with the 2-week protocol, regardless of the time of year. So that's it. That's where our food waste goes. That's what we do with our leftovers and our scraps. And it's a neat way to kind of keep things circular, if you will, to renew our soils and to provide food for some of these little creatures that I enjoy keeping. So thank you for watching, and I look forward to catching you in the next video.